Welcome. Welcome to our Bible study. It's good to be here with you to learn a little bit about Jesus. Today we're going to learn about a remarkable miracle that he's going to raise a little girl from the dead. But before we get into the scripture, let me ask you a couple questions. Do you take your problems to Jesus? I guess I kind of do. I kind of pray about it, but really, do you take your problems to Jesus? I got to tell you some stories. The first story is about a lady by the name of Diane that I knew many, many years ago. And all of a sudden, Diane started having symptoms of having a heart attack, pains in her chest and stuff. And she went to the emergency room and she sat there and she was very, very nervous, almost beside herself. And then she realized what she should do. And she took her problem to Jesus and she says, well, Jesus, if I'm going to die now, I'm going to die now. That's okay. Whatever you want, Jesus. But I'd really rather live than die. And if you could take care of me. And you know what happened? A peace came over her because she turned her problem over to Jesus. And it turned out that she didn't have a heart attack. It was something else, but that was another story. She told me her story while I was having a problem with this eye. You see, this eye doesn't see very much. And probably if you look really close, you see it doesn't always focus with this eye and it's always looking the same direction. But I started having the same symptoms in this eye that I had in this eye when I pretty much lost my vision. And I was a little bit concerned, and Diane told me her story. So I did the same thing. I said, Jesus, whatever you want. If you want me not to be able to see, not to be able to drive, and to do other things, whatever you want, Jesus, it's okay. But I'd really like to have my eye. And Jesus gave me a peace about that medical situation. And it turned out that my symptoms were only temporary, and everything is good as it can be with my left eye. So I see okay with that. Even now, Linda and I are going through some difficult times. Maybe not as difficult as you, but we're trying to sell our house and it's very, very stressful. There's one thing that comes up and another thing that comes up. And what we've learned is we take our problems to Jesus. Jesus, could you please take care of this? Whatever you want, Jesus. It's going to be all right. If we don't sell the house, it's not the end of the world. Just help us get through this. And, it's been hard. It's hard to do. But we've been getting through with the help of Jesus. Well, let me change the subject. Well, the reason we talked about do you go to Jesus and ask him to help you is because Jairus, the little girl's father, came to Jesus, as did many other people back then. Now, my question for you is: do you believe that Jesus has power over death and the ability to give life? You say, I guess so. That's what it says in the Bible. Yeah, that's what it says in the Bible. In fact, these are two of Jesus' biggest claims. He claims to have power over death, and he claims to have the ability to give life. And we're going to find that those claims were proven today when he raises this little girl from the dead. Well, here's the background. There was a synagogue official. The guy's name was Jairus, and he came to see Jesus. He fell at Jesus' feet, and what did he do? He brought his problem to Jesus. And that's why we asked that question before. And he begged Jesus, says, Jesus, please heal my daughter. She's dying. Well, Jairus wasn't any ordinary, just off-the-street guy. Jairus was a very, very important, he was the administrative head of the synagogue there in Capernaum, a very, very large synagogue, a lot of people. He was the administrative head over that, almost like being a head pastor of a big church. Not exactly, and we'll get to that. A very, very important man, a very, very well-respected man among the community. He was the head of the board of elders of that synagogue, and he was, in fact, responsible for the conduct of the services in the synagogue. He would put them together and orchestrate them and do it. Now, he was not the teacher, but he put everything together for the services they had. He was very, very, very in charge of the synagogue, very important person. You see, and then he comes to Jesus And he says, Jesus, please heal my daughter. And Jesus says, okay, I'll go with you. He agreed to go with Jairus. But on the way, this is what we studied last time, on the way, when they were on the way to Jairus' house, Jesus healed a woman who was bleeding for 12 years. And this took some time. There's a whole conversation, and he was there talking to this lady. And that is where we're going to pick up the story. Mark 5:35. Jesus had just healed this woman with the issue of blood, and this is what happens. When Jesus was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official, from Jairus' house, saying, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore?" What did they tell Jairus? They said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore?" Can you imagine how Jairus felt? Can you just imagine? Somebody comes and tells you your child is dead. So how do you think he felt? How did he feel? Devastated. Sure, he was devastated. This guy was devastated. He was profoundly sad, depressed, full of grief. Just there were no words to describe it. I mean, his precious daughter had died. Maybe he was a little bit angry that Jesus had delayed while healing the woman. He's thinking, Jesus, if you had gone right to my house, we would have gotten there before she died. You would have healed her. Everything would be all right. Now she's dead. You had to stop and deal with that woman. I wish you hadn't have done that. Maybe. I don't think so. Maybe. Or maybe Jairus was still confident that Jesus could help. I don't know. I don't know that I could have that faith. But maybe he did. Maybe he was confident that Jesus could still help. And I hope I would have some of that faith anyway. Verse 36, but Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid any longer, only believe." He looked at Jairus and he says, "Jairus, don't be afraid any longer, only believe." So Jesus says, do not be afraid, only believe. Now, this idea of not being afraid and believing is one of Jesus' key teachings. He teaches about this from all different angles, a whole bunch of different aspects. It is one of the key benefits, it turns out, of being a follower of Jesus. You don't have to be afraid. What he wants you to do is believe. So what did Jesus mean by don't be afraid, only believe? Maybe he was essentially saying, Jairus, don't worry, I'm going to take care of you. See, you got a problem, you take it to Jesus. Jesus is telling you, don't be afraid, only believe. It's going to be all right, don't be afraid. And maybe Jesus was saying, don't worry, Jairus, everything is going to be all right in heaven. The little girl's gone to heaven. I don't think that's what he was saying, but maybe. But this is one of the great promises of Jesus and Christianity. No matter how bad things get in this life, heaven awaits, resurrected body, eternity in heaven, in paradise with Jesus and with the Father. Maybe that's what Jesus had in mind. I think he had something more along the lines of, don't worry, I'm going to take care of you in this life. Maybe what Jesus was saying is believing is the most important thing. And I think that's a key concept. Believing is the most important thing. Do you believe? Do you believe everything's going to be okay? Do you believe you can have peace? Do you believe, well, it's okay, you don't have to be afraid. Believe. If Jesus was here right now, he'd probably tell you that. He'd probably say, believe. Don't be afraid any longer. Just believe. Or maybe he was saying, I'm going to help you control your fears. And that's what he has been doing. That's what he did to Diane. That's what he did to me with my eye. And that's what he's been doing with Linda and I as we go through selling the house. Maybe Jesus was saying, I certainly will comfort those who believe. And that's a great promise. If you let him, you take your problems to Jesus, he certainly will comfort those who believe. And maybe what he was saying, I'll get my followers through even the loss of a child. Can you imagine anything worse than the loss of a child? I can't. Nothing worse than the loss of a child. And Jesus is saying, I'll get you through even that. Just believe. Because there, wait a minute. And verse 37, and he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. So it's an interesting question. So Jesus says, listen, crowd you cannot come with. The only people that can come are Jairus and I guess Jairus' servants and the people that had come, and Peter and John and James. And the rest of you, even the rest of the apostles, you stay here. We're going to go along without you. You're not allowed to come. So why did Jesus limit the number of people? Well, one reason maybe is that Jesus wanted to control his fame. And at this point in his ministry, he probably wanted to control his fame. He was on a plan. He was on a strict timetable. And we're going to learn and we're going to talk more about this later. But Jesus was on a strict timetable. He had to be in Jerusalem at the Passover to be crucified. That timing had to be. That was God's plan. And he was going through great pains to control that timetable. And maybe that's why he only let these 3 people go. So who were these guys? Peter, John, and James. Well, they were apostles. We know that. And, Peter and John wrote books of the Bible and so forth. But they saw him raise Jairus' daughter from the dead. And we're going to, that's what's going to happen today. The 3 of them were the only apostles that saw that. Furthermore, they were the only 3 apostles to accompany Jesus up the mountain when he was transfigured. Jesus allowed them to see that. He was transfigured before them. They saw his glory. And they were the only 3 that got to go with him into the back of the garden when he was praying, Father, please take this cup away from me, but not as I will, but as your will be done. And so they were the only 3 that saw that. So these 3 were very important to Jesus. They saw things in Jesus' ministry that no one else did. So, when you can't sleep tonight, this is what you can think about. Think about what special things Jesus has allowed you to witness. Maybe a healing. Have you ever seen a healing? I've seen a couple, not a lot in my life. Normally, Jesus allows the doctor to take care of making people better and our bodies and healing us. But my younger son, almost certainly had lymphoma. And that's what the doctor thought it was. And they were ready to say he has lymphoma. He went back to the doctor and everything was gone. No problem. We believe that our son was healed. Linda's sister had what was certainly cancer. Certainly cancer. The doctors knew it was cancer. They opened her up to take it out. It was not cancer. It was not cancer. They were all amazed. So, once in a while, not a lot, but sometimes Jesus still does heal people. But mostly he does that. He does that through the doctors and through your body healing yourself. But maybe a special thing you've seen is a healing. Maybe a birth. Have you ever seen a birth? That's so special. I've seen 2 births. I saw the birth of my oldest daughter, and I saw the birth of my youngest son. When my oldest son was born, they wouldn't let us go into the birthing room. They made us sit outside and wait and fret. But I did get to see the birth of 2 of my kids. Life with a spouse. Maybe you could say, wow, the special thing that I just saw as I went through my life with my spouse, and it was so wonderful. That's the way I feel about Linda. We get to see each other and spend our time with each other. Or maybe some magnificent sunset. You can probably still remember that magnificent sunset that Jesus allowed you to see. Or maybe someone believing in Jesus. Just as when somebody's given physical birth, it's an amazing sight. When somebody's given spiritual birth, it is amazing. And I've had the privilege of seeing a couple of those. Verse 38. They came to the house of the synagogue officials and saw a commotion. and people loudly wailing and weeping and wailing. So there was a commotion, and people were loudly weeping and wailing. And this was unlike anything that we have today. It was loud, ear-piercing loud. And when somebody died in Jesus' time, the mourning for them was loud and it was animated. People were doing this and learn they were bending over the body and screaming and ear-piercing sounds. And there were rules and there were traditions for mourning. They hired professional mourners so that enough noise would be able to make. And they hired professional flute players. And that's what you were expected to do when somebody died. The louder you wailed, the more you loved the person, the more noise you could make, the more the person was loved. And you can imagine the scene when Jesus came upon it. They were wailing and crying for this poor girl who had died. Some of the rules were they couldn't work during the time of mourning, and they couldn't wear shoes. They beat their breasts, and they tore their hair, and they tore their garments. In fact, there was a whole ritual for tearing the garment. There was a certain length of time that you had to let that tear stand, and you were allowed to sew it up a little bit halfway through or something. But they had these rigorous rules and regulations. They hung over the body, begging for a sign of life, wailing and weeping. And so you can imagine the scene when Jesus got there was quite something. And entering in, with Peter, John, and James, and Jairus, right? And entering in, he said to them, "Why make a commotion and weep? The child has not died, but is sleeping." Jesus says the child has not died, but is asleep. And what did they do? They all began laughing at Jesus. The crowd thought Jesus' statement was absurd. What do you say? We know death. This child is dead. Don't give us any of that sleep stuff. Just keep your mouth shut, Jesus. Don't even. It's just absurd what you're saying. It's stupid what you're saying. They're all laughing at him. But putting them all out, Jesus took along the child's father and mother and his own companions and entered the room where the child was. So only the girl's parents, Jairus and his wife, and Peter and John and James were in the room with Jesus, but everybody else out. Taking the child by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cum." Now this Talitha cum is in Aramaic. That's Aramaic language. And then Mark translates it, which translated means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." So he took her by the hand, and Jesus took her by the hand and said, "Talitha cum," little girl, get up. Jesus said, "Little girl, get up." Now, I want you to notice, what did Jesus do? Jesus commanded the girl to rise from the dead. Now we know of two other people that Jesus rose from the dead during his ministry. One was Lazarus, and what did he say to Lazarus? He says, "Lazarus, come forth, rise from the dead." He commanded him. The other was the non-widow, whose son, was a grown son, Jesus raised from the dead, and he also commanded him to raise from the dead, get up. So that apparently is it. So Jesus has, you can see, authority to command people to come back from the dead. So immediately, the girl got up and began to walk. For she was 12 years old, and immediately they were completely astounded. Well, I guess so. Would you have been astounded? You're at a funeral, right? And somebody comes in, takes the person by the hand, the dead person by the hand, and raises them up. Would you be astounded? I guess you'd be a little bit astounded. So Jesus raised the girl from the dead. You know, we get jaded about talking about all of Jesus' miracles. I mean, could you imagine? This is a big deal. This was a huge thing. He brought somebody back from the dead. He did that other times as well. So this miracle shows, well, what does it show? It shows Jesus' authority over death and authority to give life. In some respects, it proves the claims that Jesus makes, that he has authority over death and the authority to give life. And would you have been astounded? I guess that's everybody saying, I would have been astounded. Mark 5:43. And he, Jesus, gave them strict orders that no one should know about this. And he said that something should be given to the girl to eat. Something should be given her to eat. And Jesus gave 2 orders. First order was, no one should know about this. Don't tell anybody. The second order was what? Give her something to eat. Interesting question. Why did Jesus want this great miracle kept secret? You know, I'm going to tell you. This question has been debated from the 1st century all the way to today. Theologians love to debate this question. Why in the world wouldn't Jesus want his fame to be going out to everybody? Why did he want them to keep this in secret? And people have postulated some of the things that I'm going to tell you. Well, maybe it was not yet his time. You know, we always talk about, it's not my time, it's not my time. Oh, it's at the cross, or preparing to go to the cross in those last days. Now is my time is here. And see, Jesus had to be crucified in Jerusalem at the Passover. This was God's plan, and this was in fact what happened, and Jesus carefully orchestrated the timing of that. Maybe that's one reason why he didn't want everybody to know about the miracle. Other people would say, you know, if too many people saw his great power, they would try to make him king. And that was going to be a bad thing. See, Jesus didn't come the first time as a king. Jesus came to teach, and Jesus came to go to the cross to die to pay the penalty for your sins. Now, Jesus is going to come back, to be sure. At the end of time, Jesus is going to come back. At that time, he's going to come back as king. But this time, he didn't come back as king. What would have happened if they made him king? People would have rose up against Rome, and maybe 1 million people would have died. I don't know, hundreds of thousands for sure. Because what happened, in fact, about 40 years after Jesus was crucified, about in 70 A.D., some Jews did rise up against Rome, and Rome came in and crushed them, killed many, 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 many people, were brutal beyond brutal. Some of the worst years of the nation of Israel, all the people that died. And that's what would have happened. That's what would have happened if Jesus had to become king, and people did a rebellion. Jesus didn't want that to happen. Maybe Jesus didn't want people following him only for the miracles. Why did Jesus do the miracles? Jesus did the miracles of proof so that people could believe his statements. I mean, if somebody told you that they had power over death, that they had the authority to give life, would you believe them? Well, but if they made those claims and then raised somebody from the dead, well, maybe you believe them because he would demonstrate it. But Jesus didn't want people. Jesus wasn't a magician. He didn't want people just following him because of the miracles. He wanted people following him because they believed in him. And the same is true today. And maybe too many people following Jesus was problematic. I mean, he had a tough time controlling the crowds as it was. There were so many people pressing in on him. There were days where he couldn't eat because there were so many people. Couldn't sleep. Everybody's pressing in on Jesus. There's so many people. How do you teach 100,000 people back in those days? Maybe he wanted to keep the crowd a little smaller so he could go to the beach and get on a boat and have everybody around him be able to hear his teaching. Maybe that was part of the reason. In any event, Jesus knew that John and James And Peter, once he rose from the dead, John and James and Peter telling everybody about this miracle. There's no need to keep it secret anymore. And I'm sure that this miracle has caused many, many, many people to believe in Jesus. Certainly one reason I believe in Jesus is that he backs up his claims with miracles. Oh, that's an interesting question. Not as heavy set in theology as the last one, but here's the question. Why did Jesus say, give her something to eat? So maybe she needed to regain her strength. Maybe she hadn't eaten in a whole lot of days. Maybe she was throwing up and diarrhea or whatever. I don't know. We don't know exactly what it was. So maybe she just needed to regain her strength because she hadn't eaten in so long. Or maybe it was to prove that she was okay. Listen, this girl, she's okay now. You don't have to worry about her. She's even eating. Or maybe dying is hard work. It makes one hungry. I don't know. I haven't died yet. Or maybe dying's hard work and makes somebody hungry. Maybe that's why it is. And you can think about that tonight also, about why he wanted them to have something to eat. All right, well, here's my summary. Jesus raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. Big deal, big deal. Jairus had great faith. He didn't abandon Jesus even when they told him his daughter had died. Jairus had great faith. First, they had the faith to come and fall down before Jesus, take his problem to Jesus. And then, even after his daughter died, he still had faith. Take your problems to Jesus. Please, take your problems to Jesus. I would help you if I can, but Jesus is the guy that really can help. He is the one that really can help. And I know this has worked in my life, worked in that lady Diane's life, works in Linda's life, works in a lot of people's lives that I know. If you have a problem, take it to Jesus. And Jesus absolutely, with this miracle, demonstrated his power over death and his authority to give life. Well, if you've been watching these videos, watching the worship videos, you know that I'm asking everybody to pray 3 simple prayers every day, maybe even 2 or 3 times a day. The first prayer is that everyone within your oikos, everyone around you, your family and your friends and the residents and staff, everybody that's around you, everybody in your residence, whether you're at home or whether you're in a nursing home or in a group home, whatever it is, everybody that they all would hear about Jesus, believe, and go to heaven. Everybody that you see every day, everybody that you know, ask that they would hear about Jesus, believe, and go to heaven. Second prayer, just pray every day for an end to racism in the United States and also an end to racism in Jesus' church. Racism is evil. It's bad. Pray. We can all, by our prayers, we can help end racism. And third of all, that virus is still out there. Please pray for protection from the virus. Please pray for protection. 3 prayers. Number 1, how do we do it? Number one, salvation for everybody around you. Number 2, against racism. Number 3, for protection from the coronavirus. And now, there's only one thing left to say. Say it with me. Aloha. See you there. God bless you all, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, take your problems to Jesus. Say our 3 prayers.